One of the common elements you see often in cinema is setting up a callback. This is when something is mentioned or seen in the film and then it's mentioned or seen again, but it has a different meaning when we see it again. Setups and callbacks can really help an audience feel like they've gone on a bit of an emotional journey as the same words take on new life because of what we learned about the story or the characters. Great callbacks seem to also have multiple layers in them. A great example of this is in the classic film Casablanca. Humphrey Bogart's character says the iconic line, "Here's looking at you, kid," 4 times throughout the film. Now, by itself, this phrase doesn't have very much meaning. I mean, it's basically kind of like saying, cheers to you or something like that. But because it's such a distinct phrase, it starts to take on new meaning as we hear it throughout the film. Bogart's character, Rick, first says it to Ilsa as they're falling in love in Paris. He actually says it twice in this sequence to etch it in stone in the audience's mind.
Here's looking at you, kid. Here's looking at you, kid.
Rick and Ilsa end up separating then, soon after that, because of the Nazi invasion of World War II. Years later, Ilsa walks into Rick's bar with her husband that she thought was dead, and it's clear that Rick is still upset about losing her. They fight a little bit, but eventually reconcile and fall back in love. Rick says the classic line again.
Here's looking at you, kid.
Now, because of the setup callback nature of this sentence, it's like Rick is saying, hey, we're in love again, just like last time. But later in the film, Rick has to choose between being with Ilsa or helping those that are resisting the Nazis. In a courageous act, he lets the love of his life go and once again utters the now bitter-sweet phrase.
Here's looking at you, kid.
So this phrase kind of acts like a mile marker, and every time he says it, we can see how far they've come since the love affair in Paris. The callback at the end of the film kind of sums up everything that's happened and how much she still means to him. Now, callbacks don't have to be this heavy or even this important. Sometimes callbacks are great for comedic beats as well. In the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark, we learn a little bit about Indiana Jones and his reptile preferences.
I hate snakes, Chuck! I hate them!
So later, when he's dumped into a pit of snakes, we know how much he hates it, and his very subtle commentary is actually pretty funny.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
But that beat is only as funny as it is because of the setup and the callback. In this case, though, it's not only humorous, but also endears the audience even further to protagonists because we realize, hey, we know this guy here. This guy doesn't like snakes, this guy. So this callback teaches us how much we've learned about him. And it really serves 2 purposes, the comedic beat and connecting us to the protagonist. In the original version of The Assurance, we had the setup and callback that we talked about in the last movie, which I loved. And in the current version, we also have a couple callbacks, one that I honestly don't think works very well, and one that I really like. The one that I don't think works very well is a callback, and also supposed to be a little bit of a reveal, supposed to be a reveal. But when we see the 6th scene, Cordelia says that one day she was exposed, and then we see the shot of the girls running away. The audience is supposed to assume that she was exposed to the plague, like people are exposed to a sickness. Later, after Cordelia was seen by the people, and we understand a little bit more about how she's important and been hid by Tayani, Tayani says again that she's been exposed, and we see the same shot of them running away again. And in theory, it would have been this great, aha moment for the audience, but I don't think we made it clear that she was being concealed and hid. So that callback doesn't really work because it wasn't clean enough of a setup and clean enough of a callback. But one time that I do think works, is a little better at least, is when Tayani is teaching Cordelia in the hut, and Cordelia's narration says that this is in the context of staying positive.
Through forests deep and desert long, I will be brave, I will be strong.
So this is the setup. It also works as is in this context as something Tayani would teach Cordelia to keep her positive. And great setups are like that. They don't stick out as setups. I mean, no one should be expecting a callback. Later in the film, we learn that these are actually directions, and that suggests that Tayani has prepped Cordelia for everything she needs to do on her journey.
How do I know where to go?
Through forest deep and desert long.
I will be brave. I will be strong.
I suppose it could still be more clear than it was, but I think it works as a callback anyway because it takes our minds back to this earlier time when Tayani was teaching Cordelia in the hut. And so even if we miss the depth of the issues in the callback and everything that's going on, all the layers, we still are keenly aware of the emotional contrast between these 2 scenes. And we're aware of that, the juxtaposition, because of that setup and callback. Now, creating setups and callbacks isn't a dramatic necessity and definitely doesn't need to be in every film. But they can be a powerful way to get a laugh or to connect us to characters or remind us how far we've come through the journey of the story.